They say some stories begin with a choice, and others begin with a mistake. Bola's story began with a sound, a soft slap against dry earth, like someone walking barefoot where no one should have been. On a quiet evening, when the sun was melting into the horizon and the village air smelled of dust and cooking fires, Bola heard it from behind his mother's hut. He stopped breathing for a moment, because in his village, strange sounds at sunset usually meant trouble. Bola was not a brave boy, but he was curious, and curiosity has a way of pulling people forward even when fear begs them to stay back. He was small for his age, with restless eyes and a mind that never seemed to sleep. The elders often said Bola asked too many questions, the kind of questions that made adults uncomfortable. Questions about the old stories. Questions about the forbidden paths beyond the farms. Questions about whether magic was truly gone from the world, or if it was just hiding. The village itself felt like it was holding its breath that evening. Children had gone indoors early. Goats were tied close, and the wind carried a warning chill. Bola remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell before her voice grew weak. Stories about objects left behind by the old world. Objects that chose their owners. Objects that could lift you up, or ruin you completely. Bola had laughed at those stories back then. But standing there in the fading light, he wasn't laughing anymore. Behind the hut, half buried in the sand, was something that did not belong. At first, Bola thought it was just an old pair of sandals thrown away by a careless traveler. But when he stepped closer, his heart began to race. The sandals were unlike anything he had ever seen. The leather looked worn but untouched by time, and faint symbols were carved along the straps, glowing softly like embers that refused to die. The sand around them was warm, even though the air had turned cold. Bola looked around. No one was watching. The village was silent, but the sandals felt loud somehow, as if they were calling him without making a sound. His mind screamed that this was a bad idea. Every rule he had grown up with told him to walk away. Yet his feet moved on their own. He crouched and brushed the sand aside, his fingers trembling as they touched the leather. The moment his skin made contact, a sharp feeling rushed through his body, not pain, but awareness. Images flickered in his mind, long roads, unknown lands, danger, and wonder tangled together. Bola yanked his hand back, gasping. He had never felt anything like that before. The sandals sat there quietly again, as if nothing had happened, but Bola knew better now. These were not ordinary sandals. These were magic. He should have called for help. He should have told the elders. But Bola knew how that story would end. The sandals would be taken away, hidden, or destroyed. The questions in his head would be ignored once more. And so he did the one thing that would change everything. He picked them up and carried them into the hut, hiding them beneath a sack of dried yams. That night, Bola did not sleep. The wind whispered against the walls, and every sound felt like footsteps coming to claim what he had taken. His dreams were filled with running, faster than he had ever run before, leaping over rivers, escaping shadows that reached for him. When he woke up before dawn, his legs ached as if he had truly traveled far. As the sun rose, life returned to the village. Women fetched water, men prepared for the farms, and children chased each other through the dust. Bola tried to act normal, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the sandals. He felt different, restless, like his body was waiting for a signal. Finally, when the hut was empty, he pulled them out again. Up close, they seemed even stranger. The symbols shifted slightly when he stared at them too long. Bola hesitated, then slowly slipped his feet into the sandals. They fit perfectly, as if they had been made just for him. At first, nothing happened. Bola let out a shaky laugh, embarrassed by his own fear. Then he took one step. The world lurched. The ground blurred beneath him, and before he could scream, the hut was gone. The village was gone. Bola stumbled and fell, landing hard on unfamiliar soil. He scrambled to his feet, his chest pounding, and looked around in disbelief. He was standing at the edge of a forest he had never seen before, tall trees stretching endlessly into the distance. Panic surged through him. Bola tried to think, tried to understand how far he had gone or how long it had taken. But something else crept into his fear, a spark of excitement. The magic sandals had done this. They had carried him beyond the limits of everything he knew. And if they could take him here, where else could they take him? As Bola explored the forest's edge, he began to notice signs that he was not alone. Broken branches. Footprints too large to belong to anyone from his village. The air felt heavy, watching him. Bola's heart whispered that this magic came with a price, and he was only just beginning to pay it. Far away, back in the village, the elders gathered around a spreading rumor. Someone had felt a shift in the land. Someone had whispered an old name that had not been spoken in years. And as Bola stood on unfamiliar ground, wearing sandals that hummed with hidden power, he had no idea that his simple act of curiosity had awakened something ancient. Something that was already searching for him. And just as Bola turned back toward the forest, unsure whether to run or move forward, the symbols on the magic sandals flared brighter than ever, signaling that this journey had only just begun. The light from the symbols faded slowly, leaving Bola standing still, afraid that even breathing might trigger something worse. The forest felt alive in a way he had never known before. Back home, trees were just trees. Here, they leaned inward, their branches tangled like they were whispering secrets to each other. The air smelled damp and old, as if it had been waiting for centuries to be disturbed. Bola took a careful step back. Nothing happened. Then another. The sandals were quiet now, but he could feel a soft vibration under his feet, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He swallowed hard and reminded himself that panicking wouldn't help. His grandmother's voice echoed faintly in his memory, telling him that fear makes the path darker than it truly is. At the time, he had thought those were just words meant to comfort children. Now he clung to them like a lifeline. He looked up at the sky through gaps in the trees and realized something unsettling. The sun was higher than it should be. Had he traveled far, or had time moved differently here? The thought made his chest tighten. If he couldn't tell how long he'd been gone, how would he ever find his way back? As Bola moved along the forest edge, he noticed strange markings carved into some of the trees. They were similar to the symbols on the sandals, though older and rougher, as if carved by hands that had forgotten gentleness. His fingers hovered near one mark, but he pulled away. Something about these signs warned him not to touch. The deeper truth began to settle in. The magic sandals were not just a tool. They were part of something bigger, something woven into this land. Bola was no longer just a boy who had wandered too far. He was a piece on a board he did not understand. Back in the village, unease spread quietly. The elders spoke in low voices, their faces drawn tight. One of them, an old man named Sadiq, had lived long enough to remember fragments of forbidden lore. He remembered stories of a traveler who moved like the wind, leaving chaos behind. A traveler bound to enchanted sandals that answered only to fate. When Sadiq felt the shift in the land, his hands had begun to shake. He knew that feeling. He had prayed never to feel it again. Meanwhile, Bola found a narrow path winding into the forest. It looked less wild than the surrounding area, as if it had been used before, though not recently. Every instinct told him to avoid it. But another part of him, the same part that had reached for the sandals, felt drawn forward. With careful steps, he followed the path, listening to every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves. As he walked, memories surfaced. His mother warning him not to wander too far. His friends laughing at the old legends. His grandmother's stories of heroes who never asked to be chosen. Bola had always felt small in those stories, like someone meant to listen, not act. Yet here he was, walking into a living legend with borrowed courage and borrowed power. The forest began to change. The trees thinned, and the ground sloped downward. Bola slowed when he heard water ahead. A river emerged, wide and fast-moving, its surface reflecting the sky like shattered glass. He had never seen a river this strong. It hummed with energy, the sound filling his ears and pushing his thoughts aside. Bola stopped at the bank, unsure what to do next. Crossing it felt impossible. but turning back felt worse. The sandals grew warm again, responding to his hesitation. He remembered the sensation of movement, the way the world had bent when he first stepped in them. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. What if the sandals could take him across? Before he could decide, a voice echoed from the trees behind him. Those waters don't forgive mistakes. Bola spun around, his heart nearly bursting from his chest. Standing a few steps away was a tall figure wrapped in a faded cloak. The person's face was partly hidden, but their eyes were sharp, studying Bola with a mix of caution and curiosity. Bola opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The stranger's gaze dropped to the sandals. The tension in the air thickened instantly. So, the figure said slowly, the stories were true. Bola took a step back, gripping the edge of his tunic. I didn't steal them, he said, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to defend himself. I found them. The stranger gave a short, humorless laugh. That's what they always say. Before Bola could ask who they were, the figure turned toward the river. If you're wearing those, they said, then trouble is already chasing you. You just don't hear its footsteps yet. Bola's mind raced with questions, but fear kept them locked inside. The stranger seemed to sense his confusion. This land remembers, they continued. Magic like that doesn't disappear. It waits, and when it wakes, it pulls others with it. Bola glanced down at the sandals, feeling their faint pulse. Can they take me home? He asked quietly. The stranger didn't answer right away. When they finally spoke, their voice was lower. Home is not always where you left it. That answer chilled him more than the forest ever could. Far beyond the trees, unseen eyes turned toward the disturbance. Ancient forces stirred, drawn by a familiar rhythm they had not felt in years. Paths long forgotten began to reopen. Promises made and broken whispered back into the world. As Bola stood between the river and the stranger, wearing magic he did not understand and carrying questions with no easy answers, one thing became painfully clear. Finding the sandals had not been the beginning of his story. It had been the signal. And somewhere something was already moving to claim what had been awakened. Bola stayed frozen by the river, the stranger's words pressing heavily on his chest. The water rushed past them, loud and restless, as if it, too, was listening. The sandals warmed again, reacting to Bola's racing thoughts, and he shifted his weight, without meaning to. The stranger noticed immediately. Careful, they said. They respond to feeling more than command. Bola frowned. You know them. I know what follows them, the stranger replied. That's enough. They introduced themselves as Kola, a traveler who had walked many lands that no longer appeared on maps. Kola spoke carefully, choosing each word like it carried weight. Bola sensed that some truths were being held back, not out of cruelty, but fear. Whatever the magic sandals were tied to, it was bigger than either of them. Kola explained that this forest sat between paths, places where the world thinned and old power still leaked through. Long ago, people had learned to use such places to move faster than the wind, to cross distances meant to humble humans. The magic sandals were part of that time, a time when shortcuts came with consequences. As they spoke, Bola kept glancing at the trees. He felt watched, not in a simple way, like an animal stalking prey, but in a deeper sense, as if the land itself was aware of his presence. He wondered how long the sandals had waited to be found, and why they had chosen him. Back in the village, Bola's mother felt an ache she couldn't explain. She paused in the middle of grinding grain, pressing a hand to her chest. Mothers often know before words arrive. By evening, Bola's absence could no longer be ignored. Neighbors whispered. Children were questioned. And when someone mentioned strange symbols glowing near the huts at sunset, Elder Sadiq's face turned pale. The sandals, he murmured. They've been found. Some elders argued that it was just fear talking. Others remembered enough to be afraid. Sadiq warned them that searching blindly could make things worse. But fear rarely listens to wisdom. A small group prepared to follow the old trails, unaware that those paths no longer led where they once did. Meanwhile, Kola led Bola away from the river to a shallow cave hidden behind hanging vines. We shouldn't stay exposed, Bola said. Not now. Inside the cave, the air was cool and dry. Strange markings covered the walls, faded but familiar. Bola recognized the shapes immediately. They're the same, he said softly. Like the sandals. Bola nodded. This place was built around them. Or maybe they were built around it. Hard to say anymore. As Bola rested, exhaustion finally caught up with him. His legs trembled, and his thoughts blurred. Bola watched him carefully, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally, they spoke again. The main danger isn't the sandals themselves, Bola said. It's what they awaken. They open doors. Not all of them close. Bola thought of the footprints he'd seen earlier, too large to belong to anyone from his village. Who else knows about them? Bola's jaw tightened. Those who have been waiting, and those who believe power should belong to the strongest, not the chosen. That night, Bola dreamed again. This time he wasn't running. He was standing on a high cliff, the sandals glowing bright beneath his feet. Below him stretched endless roads, twisting and crossing like veins. Voices called from every direction, each promising safety, glory, or answers. When he tried to step forward, shadowy hands reached up from the paths, grabbing at his ankles. He woke with a sharp breath. The cave was dark, but the sandals glimmered faintly. Outside, something moved. Bola was already awake, listening. They're close, they whispered. Bola's heart pounded. Who? Hard to say, Bola replied. But they're not lost. From another part of the forest, a different presence stirred. A figure cloaked in deep red stood quietly among the trees, eyes fixed on the faint glow ahead. This figure had followed the trail with patience, guided by signs others could not see. They believed the sandals were never meant to be hidden. They believed the old order had been a mistake, and that the world needed reshaping. The child wears them, the figure said to no one. Good. He'll lead us where we need to go. As dawn crept in, Bola made a decision. We can't stay, they told Bola. The longer you wear those, the louder the world becomes. But I don't know how to control them, Bola said. What if they take me somewhere worse? Bola met his eyes. That's the risk they force on everyone. They left the cave quietly, moving through the forest as the light returned. Bola felt torn in two directions, toward home and toward whatever future the sandals were pulling him into. Each step felt heavier than the last. In the distance, horns sounded faintly. Not from the village. These were deeper, older calls, echoing through the land. Bola stiffened. That's not good, they said. Bola swallowed. Are they coming for me? Bola didn't answer right away. They're coming for the sandals, they finally said. You're just the one wearing them. As they moved faster, Bola felt the sandals vibrate again, stronger now, as if urging him to choose a direction. The forest paths began to shift subtly, bending toward unseen destinations. Bola realized that soon, standing still would no longer be an option. Behind them, ahead of them, and even far away in the village, forces were aligning around a boy who only wanted answers. And as the magic sandals pulled tighter around his fate, Bola sensed that whatever choice he made next would change more than just his own life. The roads were opening, and they would not stay open forever. The flicker didn't return that night, but the feeling stayed with Bola. It followed him through his days like a shadow that didn't quite touch the ground. The magic sandals rested where he left them, quiet and ordinary, yet he could sense that something beneath the calm had shifted. It felt like the pause before a storm, when the sky looks peaceful, but the air grows heavy and still. Bola noticed it too. They began pacing more, listening to the land the way one listens for distant thunder. The paths don't close all at once, Bola said one evening. They tighten. They test. Bola didn't like the sound of that. Test who? Bola met his eyes. You. That night, Bola dreamed of the forest again, but this time it was closer, darker. The stone circle rose from the earth once more, cracked and glowing faintly. The sandals pulled him toward it, not with force, but with certainty. And beyond the circle, something waited, patient and unfinished. When he woke, His heart was already racing. By morning, the village felt off. Animals were restless. The river ran louder than usual. Elder Sadiq stood longer than necessary at the edge of the fields, staring at nothing. When Bola walked past, the sandals hummed once, low and uneasy. "Something's waking up," Colas said under their breath. They didn't have to wait long to see what. Just beyond the forest line, the ground split open, not violently, but deliberately, like a door opening after years of being sealed. A thin line of light traced the break, crawling outward in slow, careful movements. The old road wasn't gone. It was trying to remember itself. Bola's chest tightened. "I thought we stopped this." "We slowed it," Kola replied. "Big difference." That evening, Aaron returned. They didn't arrive with followers this time. They came alone, walking openly into the fading light, hands empty, posture calm. The red cloak was gone, replaced by plain travel clothes, but their eyes burned brighter than ever. "You felt it too," Aaron said to Bola, as if continuing a conversation that never ended. "I won't help you," Bola replied immediately. Aaron smiled sadly. "I'm not here to ask." They explained that the ancient force beneath the stone circle hadn't been destroyed. It had been interrupted. And interruptions, Aaron warned, were dangerous. The system wanted balance. If Bola wouldn't become its keeper willingly, the power would seek another way to stabilize itself. "A replacement," Bola said quietly. Aaron nodded. "Or a collapse." The word hung in the air. That night, the sandals grew warm again for the first time in weeks. Bola tried to remove them, but the leather tightened just enough to remind him of their bond. Outside, the ground trembled lightly, like a giant turning in its sleep. Kola spoke urgently. "If the core fully wakes without guidance, it won't choose gently. It'll tear paths open everywhere." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Bola asked. "Use them again? After everything?" Kola hesitated. "The roads respond to intent. If you step onto them now, they'll listen. But they'll also demand an answer." The next morning, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. Winds rolled in from nowhere. The forest groaned as if bending under invisible weight. From the village edge, Bola could see the faint outline of the stone circle pushing back through the soil, its glow stronger than before. People gathered, afraid but curious. Whispers spread. Some called it a curse. Others called it destiny. Aaron stood beside Bola, their voice low. "This is the moment they warned us about. When one choice becomes many lives." Bola felt the sandals pulse, harder now, pulling him toward the forest. He looked back at the village, his mother, the huts, the ordinary life he had fought to protect. Then he looked forward, toward the rising glow and the ancient power demanding resolution. The ground shook again, stronger this time. A deep sound echoed from beneath the earth, not a roar, but a breath, long and waking. Kola grabbed Bola's shoulder. "If you step forward, everything changes. If you don't, it still will." The sandals flared brightly, brighter than ever before, casting long shadows across the land. Paths began to outline themselves in the dirt, branching outward in every direction, visible to everyone now. Gasps filled the air. Bola closed his eyes, heart pounding, standing at the center of it all. The roads were open. The power was awake. And whatever choice came next would decide, not just where the paths led, but whether the world could carry them at all. The forest paths twisted more sharply now, no longer pretending to be natural. Bola felt it with every step. The ground seemed to lean, guiding him, pressing him forward, as if the magic sandals had begun to choose for him. His chest tightened. He wasn't just wearing them anymore. He was being carried by something that had its own plans. Kola noticed it too. "They're waking up fully," they said, breath low and tense. Once that happens, hiding becomes almost impossible. Bola's thoughts raced. "Then take them off," he said. "I'll walk. I don't care how long it takes." Kola stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "You think no one has tried that?" they asked. "These sandals don't always come off when you want them to." Bola looked down. The straps hugged his feet tighter than before, the symbols glowing faintly even in daylight. He tugged at one just to test it. The leather didn't move. Instead, a sharp pulse traveled up his leg, not painful, but firm, like a warning. Before he could react, the forest fell silent. No birds. No wind. Even the distant horn stopped. Cola's eyes widened. Too late, they whispered. From the shadows ahead, figures began to emerge. Not rushing. Not hiding. Walking openly, confidently, as if the land itself had cleared the way for them. There were 3 of them at first, then more behind. Each wore markings similar to those carved into the trees, but fresher, sharper. Their leader stepped forward, the red cloak unmistakable. So this is the child, the figure said calmly. I expected older. Bola's heart hammered. He stepped back, but the sandals pulled him forward half a step, betraying him. Cola moved slightly in front of him, hand resting near a concealed blade. You shouldn't be here, Cola said. The red-cloaked figure smiled. Neither should the sandals. And yet, here we all are. The figure's gaze dropped to Bola's feet, burning with something close to reverence. Do you know what you're standing on, boy? They asked. Do you know how many generations waited for that magic to return? Bola shook his head, throat dry. I just wanted to go home. The figure laughed softly. That's how it always begins. They introduced themselves as Aaron, a keeper of the old roads. According to Aaron, the magic sandals were never meant to be hidden away or destroyed. They were part of a system, an ancient network meant to connect worlds, not separate them. The elders, Aaron claimed, had lied. They had feared change and buried the truth along with the tools that could reshape everything. You've reopened the paths, Aaron said, spreading their arms. Because of you, the world can breathe again. Cola stiffened. Or bleed. The tension thickened. The followers behind Aaron shifted, ready but waiting. Bola felt dizzy, caught between stories that clashed violently. One side called the sandals a danger. The other called them a gift. And both were looking at him like he was the deciding factor. Then Aaron said something that shattered Bola's balance completely. The sandals didn't choose you by accident, Aaron said. You were marked long before you touched them. Bola stared. That's not true. Aaron tilted their head. Your grandmother, she knew. She was a walker once. Briefly. She stepped away before the cost was complete. Bola's mind reeled. Images of his grandmother flashed through him, her stories, her warnings, the sadness behind her eyes. You're lying, he said, but the words felt weak. Cola's silence was worse. You knew, Bola whispered to them. Cola looked away. I knew enough to hope it wouldn't be you. Before Bola could process that, the sandals surged with power. The symbols flared bright, brighter than ever before, and the ground beneath them cracked with light. Everyone staggered back except Bola, who stood locked in place as visions flooded his mind. He saw the old world, not peaceful, but powerful. Walkers crossing vast distances in moments. Cities rising and falling around the paths. He saw conflict, greed, and control twisting the magic. He saw why the elders had been afraid. And then he saw something else. The sandals were incomplete. They were only one half of a greater mechanism, and the other half had already begun to move. Far away, beneath stone and silence, something ancient stirred, fully awake for the first time in generations. A guardian, or a prison, or both. Bola collapsed to his knees as the light faded. The forest roared back to life, louder than before. Aaron recovered quickly, eyes shining. You felt it, Aaron said. The awakening. Good. That means the bond is strong. Cola grabbed Bola's arm. We have to go. Now. But Aaron raised a hand, and the followers blocked the path. Running won't help anymore, Aaron said calmly. Every step he takes lights another road. Bola's breathing came fast and shallow. What do you want from me? Aaron's smile returned, slow and certain. Not from you, they said. Through you. In the distance, the land trembled again, deeper this time. Trees swayed though there was no wind. Birds burst into the sky in panic. Even Aaron's followers looked uneasy. Kola whispered urgently, "If that second force reaches the paths before we understand it, everything breaks." The sandals pulsed once more, stronger than before, tugging Bola in a direction none of them were facing. Bola realized then that the biggest danger wasn't choosing the wrong side. It was that the choice might be taken from him entirely. And as the ground began to shift beneath their feet, the magic sandals made it clear. They were ready to move, whether Bola was or not.
The pull became impossible to ignore. Bola cried out as the magic sandals dragged him forward, his feet sliding across the forest floor without his permission. The symbols blazed like living fire, carving glowing lines into the ground as the hidden road revealed itself fully for the first time. Trees bent away, roots cracked open, and the air vibrated with power so old it felt heavy to breathe. "Hold on to me," Kola shouted, gripping Bola's arm with both hands. The force nearly tore them apart. Aaron stepped back, eyes wide, not in fear but awe. "Yes," Aaron breathed. "This is it. The heart path." The ground split ahead, opening into a vast stone circle buried beneath the forest, its surface etched with the same markings that haunted Bola's dreams. At the center stood a towering structure, half stone, half light, pulsing like a living thing. This was the source, the other half of the power. The truth behind the old legends. Bola felt everything at once. The sandals weren't just moving him, they were showing him. He saw how the old roads were created to connect people, not control them. How fear turned guardians into prisons. How the elders had sealed the power away after walkers began using the paths to dominate instead of explore. "This place needs a choice," Kola said, struggling to be heard over the rising hum. "A final one." Aaron stepped forward. "It needs a keeper," they said firmly. "Someone bound to it. Someone strong enough to use it." The structure flared brighter, responding to their words. Bola felt it reaching for him, searching his memories, his doubts, his hopes. He realized then why the sandals had chosen him. Not because he was powerful, but because he questioned everything, including himself. "I don't want to rule anything," Bola said, his voice shaking but clear. "I just wanted answers." The structure responded, its light softening as if listening. Kola looked at Aaron. "That's why he's right. And why you're wrong." Aaron's expression hardened. "You'd let all this disappear again? After everything?" Bola closed his eyes. Images of his village filled his mind. His mother's face. His grandmother's stories. He finally understood the sadness in them. She hadn't walked away because she was weak. She walked away because she saw what power did when it stayed too long in human hands. "I won't lock it away," Bola said. "And I won't let it control the world either." The sandals burned hot, then suddenly loosened. For the first time since he put them on, Bola felt a choice that was truly his. He stepped forward alone. When his foot touched the center of the circle, the structure shattered into light. The shockwave knocked everyone back, but Bola remained standing, surrounded by glowing paths that surged outward like veins. One by one the roads began to fade, not destroyed but released. The magic returned to the land, thinner, quieter, no longer something that could be owned. Aaron screamed in fury as the power slipped beyond their grasp. Their followers fled, overwhelmed by the collapse of the old system they had built their faith on. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. The forest slowly settled. The stone circle crumbled into ordinary rock. The glowing symbols faded from the ground, from the trees, from the sandals. Bola fell to his knees, exhausted. Kola rushed to him. "It's done," Kola said softly. "You ended it." Bola looked down at his feet. The sandals were still there, but they were plain now. No glow. No hum. Just worn leather. "I thought they'd disappear," Bola said. Kola smiled sadly. "Magic never fully leaves. It just changes shape." Aaron was gone. The old roads were gone. The danger had passed. Or so it seemed. When Bola returned home days later, the village felt the same, yet different. The elders sensed the shift. The land felt lighter. His mother held him tightly, crying with relief. No one spoke of glowing paths or magic sandals. Life moved on. But late one night, as Bola sat outside his hut, he felt it again. Not a pull this time, but a quiet awareness. He slipped the sandals on and stood. Nothing happened. Until he took a step. The world didn't bend. The land didn't move. But far away, somewhere unseen, a single path flickered briefly back to life. Bola frowned, heart steady but alert. The sandals hadn't ended the story. They had passed it on. And somewhere in the dark, something smiled, waiting for the next walker to choose. Bola stood still long after the faint flicker faded, his feet planted in the dust outside his hut. The night air was calm, the village quiet, but his mind was not. The sandals rested lightly on his feet now, no warmth, no pull, just leather and memory. Whatever power remained no longer pushed or demanded. It waited. Over the next few days, Bola tested them carefully. He walked the familiar paths to the farms, to the river, to the edge of the village where the land dipped into wild grass. Nothing unusual happened. No sudden movement. No bending of space. At first, relief washed over him. Then came confusion. Had everything truly ended? Or had the magic simply learned to be quiet? Kola stayed for a while, keeping their distance but never fully leaving. They watched the land like someone listening for an echo. One evening, as they sat near the fire, Bola finally asked the question that had been weighing on him. "What happens to the walkers now?" he said. "People like my grandmother." Kola poked at the embers before answering. "Most of them will live ordinary lives," they said. "That was always possible. The roads didn't give meaning. They only revealed what was already there." Bola nodded slowly. That felt true. The elders eventually approached him, not with anger but caution. Elder Sadiq spoke plainly. "We felt the change," he said. "The land is quieter, lighter. Whatever burden was lifted, you carried it." Bola didn't know how to respond. He wasn't a hero. He didn't feel brave. He had been afraid almost every step of the way. So he simply said, "I didn't do it alone." That seemed to satisfy them. Life began to settle. Crops grew well that season. The river flowed steady. The village felt grounded again, as if something restless beneath it had finally gone to sleep. People stopped whispering. Children returned to playing late into the evening. Bola was just Bola again, helping his mother, laughing with friends, listening to stories that now felt closer than ever. But the questions didn't disappear. Sometimes Bola dreamed of roads, not glowing ones, not magical, just simple paths crossing hills and forests. In those dreams, people walked them freely, meeting and parting without fear. When he woke, he felt calm instead of restless. The dreams felt like reminders, not warnings. One afternoon, Kola told him they were leaving. "The world still has places that need watching," they said. "Not guarding. Just understanding." Bola felt a tightness in his chest. "Will I see you again?" Kola smiled. "Paths cross when they're meant to." Before leaving, Kola knelt and touched the sandals gently. "You changed them," they said. "And yourself." "I didn't feel like I changed much," Bola replied. "That's usually how it works," Kola said, then turned and walked away, fading into the dust road until they were gone. Weeks passed. Then months. Bola grew taller. Stronger. His questions didn't fade, but they softened. He learned that not every mystery needed chasing, and not every answer came from power. Sometimes listening was enough. One evening, his mother handed him a small bundle. Inside was a worn cloth, and inside that, a thin leather journal. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," she said. Bola opened it slowly. The pages were filled with simple notes, sketches of symbols, and reflections written in careful handwriting. His grandmother had written about walking once, just once, and realizing that the magic wasn't in the movement, but in the choice to stop. "The road showed me many places," one line read. "But it also showed me when to come home." Bola closed the journal, his throat tight. At last he understood her fully. That night he sat outside again, the sandals beside him this time, not on his feet. The stars were bright, scattered like stories across the sky. He thought about Aaron, about those who wanted control instead of connection. He wondered what had become of them. Maybe some learned. Maybe some didn't. The world would keep turning either way. As the fire died down, Bola felt something gentle, like a breeze passing through his thoughts. Not a command. Not a pull. Just awareness. He realized then what the final twist truly was. The magic had not been taken away. It had been shared. The sandals were no longer keys to hidden roads. They were reminders. Of balance. Of restraint. Of asking why before asking how far. Years later, travelers would pass through the village and speak of paths that felt easier to walk, of journeys that led them exactly where they needed to be without explanation. No glowing symbols. No sudden leaps. Just a sense of rightness. Bola grew into a man known for listening. When disputes arose, people came to him not because he had power but because he understood its cost. He never spoke much about the magic sandals. When asked, he only smiled and said some roads are better taken slowly. The sandals stayed with him, worn and ordinary, carried more often than worn. They never glowed again. They never pulled. And yet, on rare nights, when the world felt especially quiet, Bola could swear the ground beneath his feet remembered him. Not as a walker, but as someone who chose to let the road rest. And in that choice the story finally found its end.